Hey guys, welcome back to Crafting with Cardboard. As always, I'm Mr. Waxman. I'm going to be showing you how to make some fun, easy crafts while we're all staying home. Last week in Boston, some great organizations called Edvestors and Open Doors Arts were giving free art supplies out all around the city. Hopefully you were able to get some. If you weren't, you can usually grab some cheap art supplies at the dollar store, Target, or wherever you do your shopping. I went out this morning and got some watercolors of my own, with my mask on, of course, because today we're going to be doing some drawing and painting. I'm going to be showing you guys, Bob Ross style, how to make something called a landscape painting. Okay? But before we get started with that, I wanted to remind you about our weekly Zoom call every Wednesday from 2:30 to 3 p.m. and then from 3 to 3:30 p.m. where you can show up, see some of your friends, show off some of your art, and do our draw with me, right along with me and everybody else. So make sure to pop on by for that. Now let's get started on our project. The word landscape just means an area of the outside world that you can see. A landscape drawing, painting, or photograph is just a picture of an area outside. Think of any image you've seen of the woods, or a mountain, or a river, or a meadow, or something like that. Here's some more examples. Because landscape pictures are of large areas, the paper that you use is almost always flat and sideways. This is actually called landscape style, okay? Whereas a picture of a person is usually upright because people are taller than they are wide. This is called portrait style, because that's what a picture of a person is. It's a portrait, okay? Now that we have a little bit of background, let's get started. For this step, you're going to need paper. I'll be using my sketchbook, but you can use any kind of paper you want, because we're going to be painting. The thicker the paper you can find, the better, but any paper will do. A pencil, and of course, an eraser. Normally, I would do a landscape drawing outside, but I thought we'd draw a place that we're all familiar with, Up Academy Holland. I found a picture online that I'm going to draw from, so grab your materials and draw along with me. Now I'm going to color this in later, but artists almost always draw with pencil first. Doing a loose drawing without worrying too much about detail or getting things perfect is called sketching. When you sketch, you're trying to get the basic shape and size of whatever you're drawing. So try to see your subjects not as trees and buildings, but as shapes and lines, okay? So I'm going to start by drawing, looking at this picture that we have here of our school, and by drawing from that. Now this picture was taken a while ago. If you can tell, the Up Academy logo is gone. It's not there yet, I should say. And so I'm going to draw this picture. I'm going to try to make it look like this picture, but I'm also going to add the details that I know are in there, like the bigger trees and the flagpole and the Up Academy thing. Okay, so you might not be able to see my paper great, but basically what I'm going to be doing is just looking at the different things in this picture and trying to get them in the right place and get them in the right shape. Okay, so because it's the focus, I'm going to start with the school building. All right, now that's roughly in the middle. Like here, if this is the middle right here, it is a little bit below. So this is what's called finding the right proportions, making sure everything is the right size and the right place. So basically I just see a rectangle for this little yellow area with the doors. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle a little bit below the middle and a little bit to the left. Okay, so if this is the center, it's a little down and to the left. All right, so I'm going to start with that. Just a simple rectangle. Notice that I'm like lightly brushing the page with my pencil. I'm not doing any hard lines. This is once again called sketching. Okay, and then I see 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do these lines. We will add more details in later. But basically I'm just trying to get the rough shape. Alright, so now I've done this area. Next I'm going to do the little garden that kind of curves in a little bit. And alright, now I'm going to do this part of the building. Comes up a little bit. Also looks like a rectangle, but it's like kind of angled a little bit. Alright, now I see these rocks right here. I'm going to do those. can't really see it that much, but I know that there's a big tree right here, so I'm just gonna kind of draw that lumpy little tree shape. Okay, color that in later. All right, now I'm gonna do this kind of roof section, this like metal part right here. Same shapes as before, just kind of on top of what I've already drawn. Okay. And then, so I noticed there's another rectangle up here. Once again, all I'm kind of doing is just looking at what I see here, trying to break it down into simple shapes, and then drawing that from there. Okay, so far I've pretty much only drawn rectangles for the building, kind of lumpy shapes for the squares, or for the rocks and the bushes. Once again, we'll add more detail to this later. Right now we're just trying to get the size and shape so that when we come back to paint later, it looks good. And I want to mention that making mistakes is a huge part of this. It is the only way to get better as an artist, is to make mistakes and to learn how to do better next time. That's why we have erasers, okay? So that is all right. Now I'm just going to finish up with the building. So I'll slap down and fast forward so you don't have to watch the whole thing. Really slow, but that's what I'm going to do next, and then we'll go into a couple more details after. Okay, so now I have the rough shape of the building. I'm gonna add a couple more little guys in here. Now I have the rough shape of the building, and I just want to talk about a couple of things you might have noticed me drawing. So this wall in particular, this red wall that I just drew, if you look at this, if you were standing like right here and you were looking at it, it would look totally flat and straight. But because of perspective, the word again is perspective, which basically just means like your viewpoint or the way that you're seeing things from the perspective of this photograph, it looks like the building is kind of getting bigger as it comes closer to, you know, whoever was pointing the photograph, if you were standing near the entrance of the school. And so you'll notice that my lines aren't straight next to each other, they're not parallel, they kind of go off in different directions, because this gives us the illusion that the building is kind of like coming towards us, just like you can see it in the photograph, all right? So that has to do with perspective. That means like getting things right, just like how when I draw the path, which I'm about to do, you'll notice it's thinner up here and bigger up here, right? It kind of widens out. In real life, if you were there, it's actually the same width the whole way. But because it's closer to us, it seems bigger, okay? And that is, once again, all about perspective. So I'm gonna draw that now. Okay. Next, I'm gonna add in some more detail. So right now I'm about to draw the trees. I can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're kind of all evenly spaced out. But again, the one closest to us is going to look a lot bigger, right? So I'm going to start with this small one, this little mound of dirt that each one of them is on. All right, then I'm going to draw the tree shape. I'm not going to try to draw every little leaf right here, every detail in the trunk. I'm just going to draw pretty loose lines for the trunk. And then I'm just going to draw right now I'm just going to draw some big circles, and we'll do the leaves on top of those later, okay? Now I'm drawing these a little bit bigger than they appear in the drawing, because I know that these trees have grown up a little bit since this photograph was taken, so they are a little bit bigger, all right? You can get a little creative by adding things that you know to be there, or even by adding your own details. You want to draw a unicorn on top of the school, go for it. All right, so just circles to the treetops. Next, I'm gonna draw the flagpole. That's just a pretty simple straight line coming up between these two trees. Whatevs. And last but not least, we got this big kind of tree right here. Once again, we know that this tree isn't necessarily huge, but it appears bigger because we're near it. Okay, so draw a big kind of area where the tree is, and we'll color that in later and figure out what that's supposed to look like. Okay, I see some wisps of clouds, but I'd like to make my clouds look a little more detailed. So I'm just going to draw it very lightly, because we want to leave some white space for later when we paint. I want to draw some clouds in the background. Clouds are fun to draw. They're just kind of a bunch of squiggly lumps. Okay, maybe I'll even draw the sun. You can have that in later. And, oh, the windows. I'm going to fast forward through that as well. And last but not least, I'm going to add in our little Up Academy logo. Oh, we're out of lead. Academy. All right, I won't paint that in later. Okay, so now my sketch is done. Again, it doesn't look fabulous. It's not perfect, and I didn't even shade in that much. That's all going to happen with the paint later. So for now, let's go see what Sam is up to in his workshop. Hey Sam, how's it going?
It's good.
So today we are working on some watercolor paintings.
All right.
And I was talking to the kids about how with watercolor or with any kind of painting, you make a lot of mistakes, and you know that's okay. And so I kind of wanted to know how you deal with mistakes when you're making art.
Yeah, mistakes are a big part of making art. It's part of the process. So, you know, sometimes I'll start out with an idea in my head of what I want a project to look like, and then, you know, something happens in the process and I make a mistake. And sometimes those mistakes make you rethink the project, and it, you know, turns into something different and even better than you thought it would be in the first place.
Yeah, so it's not a negative thing really. It's kind of only a positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Well, you know, it can be both. I mean,
right.
You know, it can be a positive thing, like it can make you turn your project into something better, or, you know, sometimes you make a mistake because you're trying something new and the project doesn't turn out how you want, and that's okay too, because it's a learning experience, and even if, you know, the project doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, you know, you still learn something new from it.
Totally. Well, let's take a look at these two projects.
Yeah.
So this one, what happened with this one?
So this is a side table that I designed and I made a drawing of. And the original drawing actually looks a lot different from what I ended up with.
Yep, I think we took a look at that in our first episode.
Yep. So when I started building it, I made a couple like cutting mistakes when I was cutting the wood, and so I ended up turning these what I had originally planned to be very square shapes on the top and bottom into these oval shapes, which I actually ended up liking a lot better.
Yeah, I think it's much nicer that way.
Yeah, so that's a good example of how, you know, you make a mistake, you figure out how to work with it, and sometimes you end up with something that you like even more.
Nice. All right, well, that's great. And let's take a look at what you got over here.
So right here, this is a table that we looked at a couple weeks ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So it's taken apart into pieces now because it was a project that I started, and I did a whole drawing for it. And I was using some material that I wasn't used to, like this copper right here.
Yep, I remember the copper.
So I made a couple mistakes when I was building it, and I sort of, you know, I made some mistakes and I ended up losing interest in the project. But because I started this project, I learned how to work with this material a little bit better, and the next time I do it, it'll be even better.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know may not have ended up with a finished product, but you ended up with something better.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Well, all right. Thanks.
No problem.
It's nice to know that even a professional artist like Sam makes mistakes, just like us. Sometimes mistakes are big enough that you want to start over or you want to erase it, and sometimes they're small enough or interesting enough that you even want to keep them and turn them into something interesting, like a happy accident. But no matter what, mistakes are an important part of the artistic process, and they're always going to happen, and that's okay. Now let's get back to our watercolor painting. For this step, you're going to need your drawing from before and your subject. Normally, you would be outside looking at something, but today we're using this picture. So you can either follow along with me, or I'll even include a link to this picture in the description of this video. You're also going to need watercolors, paintbrushes, a cup of water, and some paper towels. Okay, so like I said before, we're going to be using watercolors. I hope that you guys are able to get your hands on some of these, but if not, you can also color your landscape in with colored pencils or crayons or markers or whatever else you are able to get. But if you do have these supplies, here's how you do it. So I'm going to start with something that is called a light wash. Okay, so with watercolor, we obviously know that the paints are dry and you need to add water to them to be able to, you know, use them to paint with them. The less water you use, the darker the color is. So we're going to use, for our first coat of color, we're going to use what's called a light wash, which means you're going to use a lot of water, which means we're going to dip our brush in. I'll start with this one. And I'm going to start with the sky. I'm going to pick a nice blue. And I'm going to get a lot of water. As you can see, I'm, kind of adding a lot here. And I'm not stirring it in a ton, just a little bit, because I don't want this to be a dark color just yet. We'll add the darker tones in later. Now I'm gonna grab my little test piece of scrap paper right here to test the color and make sure that it's the color, the shade that I want. Yes, it is. Okay, so that's what your light wash is gonna look like. And I'm gonna do this over the sky. And I'm going to keep the clouds white, where actually the white spaces in a watercolor painting, you generally don't paint with white, you just leave them like what the paper is. So I'm going to paint the sky now. Here we go. All right, so I'm gonna do the sky all together. So far I've done my light wash, which I just showed you, is like getting a lot of water on your brush to keep that color nice and light. But if we look at the picture, we see that the sky gets a little bit darker up near the top, right? A little bit lighter near the bottom, and because I added in my own little imaginary sun, it's also gonna get a little lighter around here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna add in the darker areas, kind of around the edges, and we're gonna do this with the rest of this painting too, but we'll just keep it to this guy for now so that it's easier to explain. I'm going to do darker around the edges, and then I'm going to start to add in some colors from the sun, okay? And I'm just going to do that all together, and then we'll talk about it after. So to get a nice dark color, you're going to want to mix it a lot, really stir up the paint from the bottom of this little thing, so you get a nice deep dark color. See how much darker that is on my test sheet? You can see the difference, right? So that's the color that I'm going to be trying to get kind of around these edges. Okay. All right, so I've made a mistake. I made it a little bit too dark here. That's okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to brush the paint off my brush with this paper towel, which is super handy. Get a little, just water, not paint, so I can lighten this up a little bit. And it's not exactly how I want it to look, but that's all right. I'm gonna work with it now. I'm gonna try to make it a little bit lighter so that the transition from this dark area to the light area is a little smoother. Okay, and you can even, a really good trick is to even use paper towel on the paper if you feel you've used too much paint, which I do. All right. Okay, so now I have my sky. As you might have noticed, I did some orange streaks for the rays of the sun, and then I decided that I actually didn't want them anymore, so I just mixed them in with the rest of the paint, and once again, another little accident that turned into something kind of pretty. And I can still see the lines from before, but that's okay. That's not a huge deal, because I'm not going for perfection. I'm going for something that I'm happy to look at. All right, now I'm going to start to do I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just not going to talk through these steps anymore. I'm going to do a light wash on all the other areas, on the yellow parts of the building, and the red parts, and the green grass, and all that other stuff. Once again, I'm going to start with the light wash, and then go in with the darker colors after, and then add some little touches in like I did with the sun before. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to give the clouds a little bit of a shadow as well, because they are white, but clouds do have, they get a little shadow on them. They've got areas that are a little bit darker if you ever spend some time looking at clouds. It's a good color, but because it's a cloud and they are really white, really light, I'm gonna do a pretty light color for this one too. So I'm gonna keep doing this gray until I get a nice light one. Okay, and then I can use this for the shadow on the clouds. So the shadows just go, kind of on the other side of the cloud from where the sun's coming. So if the light is coming from this way, which is it is, then the shadows are going to be over here. Because the cloud is on the other side of this, or because the sun is on the other side of this cloud, it can have kind of a lot of shadow. If you want to get a really dark color, like I want to make sure the shadow, I don't know how well you can see, but I'm trying to paint in a shadow here. So I'm going to add a bit of a darker yellow to this light yellow that I've already been using. A little bit. I'm going to finish this off camera. I'm going to finish some parts of it off camera, and then I'm going to come back once a little more is finished to give you some more, more salient little tips and tricks. Okay? All right, so now that I have a light wash and most of the details in for this, I drew some branches in for the trees and some greenery and other things, painted them in rather. Now I'm going to add some details, like some of the really dark shadows. So if you look at this picture here, you can see that there's a really dark shadow right here from the tree that's being cast by the tree. So I'm going to use some darker colors to paint that in. So I'm just going to get, I have green for the grass. I'm just going to get kind of a darker green here and then mix that in with the color from the grass. And then I should get like a nice kind of dark green for the color of the shadow of the tree. And if you ever look at the shadow of a tree, you can kind of see little bits of light through it because of the leaves, the holes in the leaves and everything. So I'm not going to do one big block of color. I'm just going to do lots of little dabs, right? So that you can still see a little bit of light coming through. Maybe not so much near the trunk, but out here. Okay, so that kind of looks like the shadow of the tree. And then because now I have the sidewalk, which is gray, I'm going to switch to a darker gray for that part. And do the same thing, just like little, oop, that's a little bit too much. Just some, little dots. Little dashes for where the shadow is. Okay. All right. Then I'll do the shadows. Actually, that's pretty much it for the dark parts. Now I'm going to add in the leaves for the trees. And basically I'm going to do the same thing I just did with the shadow. I'm just going to do little kind of dots of color. Okay, so I'm going to do dark green for this tree. You can watch me do that now. Now, because there's a little bit of lighter spots, I'm just going to add what's called a highlight, which is where you take a lighter color and go over a darker color. It's kind of like the opposite of a shadow. Just up top where the sun is hitting it, I can see some highlights. I'm going to do some lighter green up there around the edges. Give a little bit of texture. Okay. Next I'm going to do these trees. I'm going to do the same thing, just little dots of color. Little dots of green. Okay, so this is basically done. Now the last few steps, I'm gonna add some tiny details. Like I'm gonna make it say Up Academy Holland up here with some really light blue, but I'll do that once it dries. And then after that, I'm going to use a little, very small amount of black paint. I try not to use too much because it can kind of overpower it, but I'm gonna use a very small amount for the black windows and then for the flagpole and some other like really small black details. So now I'm gonna add those details in. So I'm done. This isn't perfect. It's not, it doesn't have a ton of detail. But the important part is that I had fun making it. I was fine with making any mistakes, and that I did my best to make it look mostly like what I was looking at, right? Because this is as welcome as you are to get creative and fictional with it. Most landscape paintings or drawings are done realistically, meaning you're trying to make it look like the thing that you're painting a picture of. So hopefully you guys can maybe do the same painting, or maybe go outside and do a painting of your house or your yard or your neighborhood or whatever. But just have fun with it, and yeah, don't stress about your mistakes too much. They're part of the process. All right, guys. Thanks for stopping by for another episode of Crafting with Cardboard. See you next time.